some people from here and there, but the good ones go through a filter.
So they let you do bits and pieces.
They do a filter, good ones, then finish up in Nairobi. The ones that don't want in Nairobi, they send them out to the divisions. So anyway,
तो वो तो आपके लिए बहुत ही अच्छा अनुभव रहा होगा हांगकांग और सॉरी बैंकॉक से फिर नैरोबी तो आपके परिवार सब साथ में बच्चे साथ में
my children, my wife and children came with us to Nairobi, but it was a sudden one too, sudden offer, and therefore actually my wife had to stay back and finish the house, do some improvements to the house for renting. Now suddenly we got to rent a house. We lived in that house for 10 years. We got to rent the house. So, but anyway, she was very good. She arranged all that, fixed all that up, and brought the boys. But I had to go a month earlier.
तो वहां से नैरोबी में 3 साल थे आप नहीं
Nairobi में I was 14 years.
14 years.
14 years, right up to my retirement.
Oh my God.
In fact, they kept me 6 months after retirement age. Yeah.
Oh,
so no, that was the headquarters. So you don't go anywhere else from there, in that field.
So 17 years of बाहर थे Fiji.
In the
United Nations.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
तो ऐसा हुआ नहीं. In Nairobi, the project I was taken into was the International Year of Shelter. That was to be in 1987, but from 1984 the work started.
Had begun, yeah.
What we had to do was to establish our system of network of habitat focal points throughout the world for contact. And the main purpose of that international year was to review the housing policies of governments, especially in developing countries, and find out, identify which are the good ones which are working properly, so that they could be an example to the other countries.
Yes, as a template.
Yeah, some countries were very good. And in the Asia Pacific region, actually, the most impressive was Sri Lanka. They had a 100,000 houses program, which later on converted to a 1 million houses program. Very good, very much community-based.
It's important, no?
It's very much community-based. And therefore, the community did a lot of the decision-making on acquiring the land, talking to the landowner. There's a landowner that owns a lot of land. He is this 200 people. So,
yes, it
how long can a landowner resist this kind of plea?
Yes.
So in that they had construction of building materials, making earth bricks and those kind of things, and window frames and all that. So all the house building process sort of started at the community level with government support, with a lot of government support in terms of technology, information, and also some money for buying things which they had to buy.
अच्छा अंकल जी एक प्रश्न है आपकी तरफ यूनाइटेड नेशंस का जो अथॉरिटी है पावर्स है ये जब गवर्नमेंट्स होते हैं उन पर होता है कुछ उनका केवल वो एडवाइजरी की तरह है कि कैन दे डिक्टेट टर्म्स एंड conditions on governments?
No, there's no dictation of terms. Actually, later on I said that it was one of the failure part of it. Failure in that there's different levels. One, the government never gets to a start to change their policies. What they used to do was to get a loan from the World Bank or something. And that will do a project of so many houses, maybe 10,000 houses. But that's allocated to only people who can afford. After that, there is no more loan. You still have to pay the first loan. Then there is change of government. You have good communication with this habitat focal point that I mentioned. Usually, it was the permanent secretary in the government in the various developing countries. You have good location with them. visit them, invite them to meetings or hold meetings in their region. I had responsibility to hold about 15 meetings, regional,
जी
West Africa, Southern
सब
Africa,
ट्रैवल करना पड़ता था आपको
North Africa, one in Russia, Caribbean, Latin America, Indonesia,
जी
India, all over the place, Papua New Guinea.
जी
And then everything works, but then there's a government change. A new government comes and they have other priorities. Or there's a cabinet reshuffle. The new minister for housing is not not so keen.
he has got different ideas.
He has different ideas, no? And there was a lot of pressure too, because with housing for the poor people, the process we were promoting was what we call the enabling strategies.
जी
Enabling means you provide individuals and communities with secure land, loan finance, and services of roads and sewage and bus transport and all that.
जी
And let them do the building.
जी
And they can build slowly over time, starting from a shack. But sometimes ministers were under pressure from the big building contractors
yes
and those kind of people who wanted big projects to do their building contracts, which was fine. We produced building, but it went to the wrong strata of people.
That's the problem.
So there were these
were the problems that affected the real thing that you wanted done. So yes.
But actually quite a number of governments took on very seriously.
And they took the advice and then they did the right thing. Yeah.
And also in some large countries, they have a federal structure. Big countries like Nigeria and some others in West Africa have that kind of system where some states are very advanced and very serious about it. So there was a program after the international year. It was so well received that it got converted into the global strategy for shelter. It was the global program for shelter, and there was a very good policy document prepared for the use of governments. And not all governments could apply all of it, because it said for housing to be successful, it had to start with the Prime Minister. And the national economic development process must be involved in that. And very few countries were able to do that. And Fiji was one of them. But anyway, that's...
So United Nations का experience आपका जो रहा है, so you were basically जो लोगों के लिए रहने के लिए जो घर इत्यादि था, उस पे आप स्पेशलाइज करते थे, जिसे आपने कहा है ये जो हैबिटेट प्रोजेक्ट है ना?
In many countries, but I spent a lot of time explaining the policies, because there was a very detailed document prepared, the global shelter strategy, and that had some focus on certain areas. One was macroeconomic policy. जब तक macroeconomic policy right नहीं है, तब तक it won't happen at the lower level. Then there was institutional policy. Institution of a housing authority, finance, infrastructure services, and community participation, and local government. All this has to be there with the proper powers and resources at work. And then there was housing supply and production, land, building materials, construction skills and trades, and all that.
Involved,
so then the other thing was what we call housing indicators. How to measure the application of the policy. Policy to hai.
लेकिन इसको apply कैसे होगा?
Okay, policy hai or apply भी किया है. But what has it produced? How many houses, or what quality, at what price, went to which sectors of the population, which income level of the population, and into which regions, and so forth. And the NGOs, the civil society, liked it very much. Because they could use their own resources, and a lot of university research units became interested in that. They could look at the government housing policy in a particular town and analyze it very thoroughly as to what is being produced, what the cost is being produced, what is the affordability, who is gaining and who's losing, and so forth. So the housing indicators was a very good thing.
Very good thing, yeah.
But anyway, I was the coordinator for that global shelter strategy, linking with all the habitat focal points, and also within the United Nations Center, because we had a research and development unit. There was an information division, and there was a technical cooperation division, which actually worked with the UNDP and governments for assistance that they need. So we tried to naturally include as much housing as possible, but any technical assistance depended on the government's own priority. If they wanted a beef farm, then we can't say no, we go to a housing.
बिल्कुल. तो उस आपका जो लगभग 14 साल का सफर नैरोबी में रहा अंकल जी, तो उसमें वहां पर आपका कुछ अनुभव शेयर करेंगे कि अपार्ट फ्रॉम जो काम आप तो कर ही रहे थे, वहां का लिविंग कैसा था, मौसम कैसा था, और कुछ और वहां के विषय में बताइए.
Nairobi was very different. Bangkok, it was a tropical city. You sweated all the time. Office was air conditioned. You wore safari suits. But Nairobi is about
it's such a high place.
5,000 feet
above sea level. Oh God.
वो ऐसा है कि African continent है. तो वहाँ Ethiopia से through Nairobi down to Zambia, right down to South Africa. पहाड़ है. It's a big mountain range that goes right along the continent there. And Nairobi was it was called an air-conditioned city. It was so good. But apart from that, we found food was very good. General public health was very good. And also there was, by food I mean more in terms of vegetables and meat, and all the pulses and all that. And there was a small Asian population.
Very small.
Small one. And they had their own shopping centers and a market, and everything Indian was available. And even in the big shopping centers, everything in all the masalas and everything, was,
तो आपका कोई दिक्कत नहीं हुआ.
No problem at all. And there were two very interesting things in Nairobi. One was the national parks. There were areas which were designated for animals only. Human beings were not allowed to go in there, do any farming or anything. And these were national parks where the animals lived by themselves, killed each other when necessary.
Just in a natural habitat.
In a natural habitat. And so you could go in there. Of course, you have to go in a very well enclosed car.
Oh, yes.
And it was quite possible to see, if you go there early in the morning, the line looking for breakfast, and finally getting the breakfast after a long race. So a line will get onto a deer or a gazelle or a zebra. Zebra, not giraffe, zebra. And run after it, and finally jump on his neck and drag him down. Interesting thing, when that breakfast was finished, the vultures came. The birds.
For the leftovers.
And 2 hours later, the tour guide will take us to the same place again, and there's only bones there. There's only bones there, nothing left, no sign of any other activity there. So there were elephants, giraffe, and leopards. Only thing they didn't have is the tiger. Tiger is more in Asia than in Africa. And there are hundreds. Zebra were moving in hundreds and so forth.
Very interesting place.
Very interesting, and there was migration at times from across the border from Tanzania into Kenya, because they follow the rainy season and the grass growth and so forth. Now that was one thing. The other thing was this part of the country called the Rift Valley. The Rift Valley is a large valley, large flat valley that goes right across right along the continent. Starts at Ethiopia, Sudan, goes to Kenya, Tanzania, goes down to Zambia, and down further down. And it is a crack in the Earth's surface. There's a lot of volcanic activity underneath. And scientists say that in 25 million years' time, it will separate out of the continent. Just like there's a theory that the island of Mozambique was at one time with the mainland, and it separated out. And there is some theory also that even New Zealand was once attached to New South Wales and separated out. But the important part about the Rift Valley is that it is a wide valley. It's not a deep valley. It goes down, but once you go down, it's all flat. And people do a lot of farming there. Well, there's a lot of farming, vegetable farming, and all that. And there's also there's a lot of extinct volcanoes, geysers, hot spring geysers, and so forth. And the whole area is full of bird life.
काफी natural habitat है.
Very much. Very fine place.
तो आपका वहाँ पर जो 14 years था, काफी अच्छी तरह से बीता होगा ना?
But after a while you go to a place once 3 or 4 years. You've seen it all, no? But there's one disadvantage in that we were away from the coast. We were 500 kilometers from the Indian Ocean.
समुद्र इत्यादि का बहुत कम.
So you go to the sea only once a year. The seaside was very good, very tropical, of course. But all very, very well developed. A lot of hotels, a lot of flat land with crops that we don't see very often, like cashew nut. Large plantations of cashew nut and so forth. And we even saw one cement factory which was being rehabilitated into a crocodile farm. They hatched crocodiles. You could see baby crocodiles that long. And they hatched these crocodiles and exported it to zoos around the world.
Interesting. तो ये तो था आपका सफर नैरोबी में तो जी.
So just one thing, I talked about housing. But gradually in my later years, I went on to a higher level of administration. I was in charge of the Habitat Foundation. The foundation raised money through governments and other sources for the work program, because the New York budget gave a certain amount for the work program, and we had raised money through the foundation. The foundation was another budget really. It had a full process of receiving money, allocating money to projects, and then reporting on that. The other one was always linked with that, was reporting on program coordination. I had to go to New York a few times a year on reporting how the program was going. There's a program approved by the General Assembly. And so each agency had to submit regular report. So naturally, a report is done, say 2 years ago. A program was prepared 2 years ago, but in the 2 years, 3 years, things have changed, priorities have changed, and therefore there was always this tussle of why did you change this, why did you change that.
Oh,
And I had to tussle with this committee, which was made up of ambassadors in New York.
much.
All these ambassadors, they go from all these, they are members of various committees.
Ji,
You know, some are actually in the political side with the Security Council,
ji.
but we're on the economic, social development.
Development side.
Yeah,
So that's interesting. और फिर यूनाइटेड नेशन से आगे अंकल जी हमारे पास.
Then I came to retiring age.
जी.
And I settled in Australia. That was a bit of a disappointment in a way.
जी.
Because my plan was to set up as a consultant in Fiji.
जी.
Because I thought I had sufficient knowledge of land and town planning and housing to be a consultant there, not just for Fiji, but for the South Pacific. Because I knew from my work in Habitat and working with various aid agencies and so forth that there was no shortage of money. There was no shortage of money. But there was a shortage of good, well-defined projects.
Yeah.
To explain just what it would have, what it would achieve, how it would affect the economy and the people. You know? What are the side benefits, the hidden benefits of the project? So I thought I could do some work on that and prepare projects for inviting aid agencies to come in. And I know that Japan was very active in the Pacific. JICA and Japan International Cooperative Agency. I had a good contact because one of my bosses in SCAP, Bangkok, was a Japanese. You know, and I was still in touch with him. And I had a lot of contacts with a lot of European countries who were funding aid. You know. But anyway, then this was 1997, and this was 10 years after the coup, and nothing had happened. You know, Rabuka was still in charge, and country had gone down, the currency had gone down, and people's report was that don't bother coming back. You know, it's no good. So we settled in Australia. Now, so in Australia, I set up as a consultant again. That was my idea, that I had something to give.
Give back to the community.
So I set up as a consultant. And I had two or three clients straight away. One was the International Union of Local Authorities, based in, or regional office was Jakarta. I prepared a report for them on local government in Fiji. They were preparing reports on local government in about a dozen countries in the Asia Pacific region. So they picked on me to do that. So I did that. They were a bit surprised that there are two systems of local government. You know, one is the normal local government, one is the Fijian local government of provincial councils, Tikana councils, and village councils, and bullies.
Thoda complex hai.
Complex.
Very cool.
For a small country.
Yes, it's very complicated.
Then I also did a report for there's a group called the Commonwealth Human Ecology Council. They're linked with the Commonwealth Foundation. Anyway, I finished up going to the CHOGM meetings. Commonwealth heads of government meeting.
Yes.
The NGO section, where we presented a few things. And then I prepared for SCAP. You see, that's one thing I did not mention in my Nairobi section, was the Habitat Conference, Habitat 2 conference. I mentioned I went to the Habitat 1 conference long time ago, but the Habitat 2 conference was held 20 years later.
20 years later.
20 years later, and I was part of the secretariat that prepared for that conference. You see, government delegates go to a conference, but before that, a lot happens inside. To prepare
the documents.
All the documentation and all that.
A lot of work.
So anyway, so after that, there was a decision by SCAP in the Asia Pacific area to have its own regional habitat agenda for the South Pacific. And so they asked me to prepare an overview report on what the problems are. What the problems are and what possible solutions are in the South Pacific. So I prepared a report. It's called Managing the Transition from the villages to the city in the South Pacific.
वो तो बड़का फिजी का हमारा तो ये प्रॉब्लम है शायद ना
Managing the transition from village to the city. So it was very well received. In fact, it was so well received that it got listed in the British House of Commons reading list for MPs.
That's a
Every
big achievement.
day or every week, the House of Commons office issues a list of publications throughout the world that seem to be interesting for MPs. So it was in that list.
Wow.
And also Harvard University got in touch with me. They had noticed the report. And of course, it was published as a UN publication. They had noticed the report and they wanted me to prepare a summary for their Asia Pacific magazine, quarterly magazine. So an article appeared in the quarterly magazine of around 2001, I think. And they also asked permission to use that report as part of their course, one of their courses.
Wow.
So
that's a big achievement.
It was a big achievement, very well received. Yeah. But then
फिर यहाँ क्वींसलैंड में भी शायद आप कुछ किए
then I'm still a consultant. I got a job with the Queensland government, a consulting job. And they wanted me to prepare in the housing section of public works, a property assets management plan. And I went in there. It was 3 months assignment. Very interesting. This is the first time I'm looking at what they call first world housing, not third world housing. Not the community participation one, but where the government gives it from the top.
That's right.
Very interesting, but the important thing was that this was a large portfolio of buildings, about 50,000 at that time, 50,000 properties over Queensland. And so I identified a number of problems. One, there was aging. Buildings get old. Buildings built in 1940s are still going in.
That's right.
The 90s. There was a very high maintenance. Maintenance bill. And then there was zoning. A lot of it was in low density zone, but we needed more housing in the medium density zone so that we can make better use of the land.
Better use of the land, yes.
And then there was another thing, the social factor, in that people with disabilities and all that had to be accommodated in social housing. There was no specific
housing for them.
Housing for disability, physical disability or mental disability. They all had to be put in here. So that created a social kind of issues, we could mix people. So I was there. But then two things happened at this time.
ये तो बहुत
One,
जो काम आपने यहाँ बतला रहे हैं ये तो बहुत हाई लेवल की काम आपने किया है
that report went to the cabinet. So once I finished all that, after a few months, I got a brief note to say that cabinet had noted it.
Very nice.
Then one thing was happening then. So my wife began to feel sick. She had some problems. It was very difficult to diagnose. We went through lots of specialists. But one thing I found in the system here was that each specialist was too specialized. Even though one of the doctors suggested a specialist physician, we went to him too in Wickham Terrace, but he unfortunately wasn't much help. And it was only when there was a very serious situation arising, then she had to undergo an operation. And then they found the real problem was in the liver. So, so she sort of improved for a while, but liver is one of those things where once it gets to a certain stage, it's very difficult to
look after it.
But anyway, so what happened with that was that I was not able to travel on my consultancies. It was very difficult to travel when I had to be home.
Look after.
So at that time, the Department of Public Works and Housing offered to me to join as a public servant. I said no. I still wanted to be a consultant. So for 3 years, I stayed as a consultant. But instead of 3 months, they extended it
to 3 years.
But then after that, they decided no, either consultancies were being abused in the system. A politician's friend would be coming as a consultant and stay for long, And so I think when Mr. Beatty came in as premier, he decided to clean that system up. So they offered me a job, a permanent job. So from the year 2000, I became a public servant in the town planning section of the public works and housing. And then because I had been involved in the past, they created, as a result of that past, really, the work I did as a consultant, they created a new unit, one of the small units called portfolio strategy. How to massage the portfolio housing, how much to destroy, how much to sell off, where to build the new ones, and so forth, statewide. So I was later on appointed manager of an amalgamated strategy and planning unit. Around about 2008 or so. And then I stayed in that position until I retired in 2019.
Wow. So आपने यहाँ भी कितना दिन काम किया? God, amazing. तो ये तो था आपके करियर के विषय में अंकल जी और आपका यहाँ पर काम, और बस हम इंटरव्यू के तकरीबन एंड में जाने वाले हैं, तो आप अपने परिवार के विषय में संक्षिप्त में बतलाइए कि आपके जो विवाह संस्कार तो ऑब्वियसली फिजी में ही हुआ होगा, और फिर बच्चे के विषय में कुछ बतलाइए अंकल जी।
My wife was an ND girl. She went to Sri Vivekananda High School. And also trained as a nurse in Australia, as a nurse and a midwife. Then we got married in '93 in Fiji, and then we lived in Suva. I'm from Rotorua, she's from Lindi, so Suva was a new place for us. It was a very different place. So we lived in so many places. We lived in Masese, we lived in Rewa Street, we lived in Sambula. We lived in Sambula North, we lived in Tamabua, we lived in Botswana. And finally, we found a house in Suva Point. Very nice house in Suva Point, overlooking, not directly, but sort of indirectly overlooking the sea. And it had a good backyard, so my children grew up there. I have 3 boys who grew up there. They all went to St. Columbus Primary School in Turak. And 2 of them went to Maris Brothers High School, but by the time my youngest son was still in primary school, we shifted to Bangkok. One thing interesting there was my eldest son, Deva. He was in Maris Brothers High School, and during 1979, he was part of the school's Girmit group. They linked up with the Suva cultural group that was preparing for the Girmit centenary. And so they became involved and became part of their group and into dance performance and part of a special drama that was created there. So this boy has got very strong Girmit connections.
That's very nice. And Deva की नाम आप बोल रहे हैं तो Deva यहीं तो रहता है ना ब्रिस्बेन में कि नहीं?
He's in Brisbane now. Yes.
हाँ, उनके पास एक रेस्टोरेंट है. हाँ, ठीक है, उनको जानता हूँ. जी. And वो पॉलिटिक्स में भी थोड़ा इंटरेस्ट लेते हैं, शायद कुछ सीट्स पे खड़े हुए थे.
Works with the Logan City Council. Logan City Council, as you know, was recently, or about a year ago, suspended throughout. And in the new elections, he posed himself as a candidate.
जी.
He went as an independent without being part of
Any party, yeah.
party.
जी.
For independence, it's a bit difficult
Difficult to,
anytime, you know.
oh, of course. Yeah.
But he lost very narrowly.
Hmm.
But he tells me that he wants to go again, so it's up to him. Yeah.
Naman se mila hua.
The other son, Vasant, they all went to school after marriage to the international school in Bangkok. And then they finished at Brisbane Grammar School. Vasant came under the influence of American teachers very much. He was also a very strong maths physics man. And so he was at QET for a while, but then he transferred to America. And he did engineering there. And he settled there. He's in America. Worked with a private company there. And the youngest son, Madhu, as I said, he was about halfway in primary school.
When you had to go.
Yeah, he was 10 years old when he had to leave. You know? So he went through the American system all the way through. And he virtually grew up in Nairobi. Yeah. You know, as a teenager, he grew up in Nairobi and therefore mixed with a lot of Africans from different parts. And that has paid him off actually, because he's now a lawyer in immigration and humanitarian human rights issues. And a lot of his clients are Africans. And he knows Africa backwards. He knows exactly what's happening in Ethiopia.
He understands.
Yes,
he understands.
He knows the places. Been to the.
Yeah. Now he's doing very well too. Yeah, he's doing very well. I think,
yeah. So that was the family, and I have two grandsons, grandchildren from both of these two sons. One has graduated in design, and he's now doing postgraduate work in Melbourne, RMIT. So the family is moving along.
Everyone is doing well, and they're all very well and highly educated. So ये तो बहुत अच्छी बात है अंकल जी. और तो परिवार के विषय में भी हो गया, और अब हम शायद आखिरी प्रश्न के तरफ चलते हैं कि आपका जो अनुभव रहा है, एक्सपीरियंस रहा है, it has been a very big experience. तो आप हमारे जो आने वाले जनरेशन है उनके लिए क्या संदेश देना चाहेंगे अंकल जी?
It's very difficult for me to set down what set down what I think they should be doing. But there are a few things, and I made some notes actually for them. And it's a message that is not new. This is a message for youngsters. Right? The message is not new. It was a message that was created by the Girmitias when they finished their indenture system. And that is two words: get educated.
Get educated, yes.
The Girmitias made that a priority.
Absolutely.
So get educated is a very vital thing for all youngsters, because life is moving very fast. Life is moving very fast. And by get educated, what I mean is become skilled in something. Become skilled in a profession. Become skilled in a trade. And keep on improving it. If I can just read from my list, if you don't mind. Always, today, that message of get educated needs to be extended to new dimensions. One, go the extra mile. Don't just stop where you are
comfortable and you say,
comfortable.
Okay, that's it.
You got to go much further. Keep going. Do more homework than that's said by the teachers. Read widely. This is from my own experience. My grandfather and grandmother used to make me do more homework than what the teacher gave me. And it sort of became ingrained in me.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. Spend your time wisely. The balance between study, sports, recreation, and work around the house. This is very important because we've all been brought up with a bit of home gardening, and looking after a lawn, growing a few trees. And this is very important for youngsters here. If anything, to connect with nature.
Of course.
That's very important, to connect with nature. And especially with home gardening, they come into contact with our vegetables. The bindi and the boda and the torai and the loki.
Very true.
No?
Bilkul sahi.
Yeah. It's very important. They're all very valuable foods.
Of course, yeah.
No,
अगर वो गार्डनिंग करेंगे नहीं तो फिर जानेंगे नहीं ना.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, learn your profession or trade thoroughly and constantly expand your knowledge. Because everything around you is changing all the time.
Yeah.
Learn your mother tongue, promote arts and culture, and contribute to the community that you live in.
It is बहुत important.
That is very important. And this last one is a double-edged one. You contribute not only to the community, your Indian diaspora community, but to the Australian community.
The wider community.
The wider community.
Bilkul.
Yeah. And be physically active. It can lead to a long and healthy life. That's very important to be physically active. For youngsters, they must know. Otherwise, diseases creep in unknowingly.
अभी तो बहुत ऐसे बीमारी चलते हैं ना जो पता भी नहीं लगता. जी.
Then constantly expand your knowledge of your Girmit heritage by reading wisely and discussing with others. Now, this is not an easy one for them. Even if they want to do it, there has to be some process for exposing them to this knowledge. The knowledge is there everywhere, but maybe it is not all that accessible.
Very true.
There's a lot written about Girmit. There's no need to write any new thing, but maybe there's need to assemble all that into a readable form for youngsters.
उसको जो awareness बोलते हैं. I think that's what we need to do.
Now, youngsters in the diaspora, I have great hopes for them because, as you can see from my background, going overseas to study was a major effort.
Big thing.
As I mentioned, only 8 out of 30 from my class went overseas. The rest went to work for Singapore carpenters. But now these guys are in overseas.
It's a big opportunity.
This is a tremendous opportunity. And that is what coming back about. The Girmit has created that for them.
Yes.
By direct or indirect means, assisted by Rubupa. But the Girmit created for them.
That's right.
So make use of it.
बिल्कुल. क्या बात, बहुत सही. तो अंकल जी आपसे बात करके तो बहुत अच्छा लगा और आपका जो मैसेज है, आपका एक्सपीरियंस हमने शेयर किया हुआ है और श्रोता जो रेडियो को सुन रहे हैं इस समय, आपको भी अच्छा लगा होगा. अंकल जी का जो सफर रहा है काफी लंबा और सुहाना सफर रहा है और मैंने तो बहुत एंजॉय किया, उनसे सीख के बहुत कुछ सीखा हूँ और मैं आशा करता हूँ कि आप भी सीखे होंगे. और अंकल जी इस कार्यक्रम में आने के लिए आपको मैं विशेष रूप से धन्यवाद देता हूँ और आपने हमको बहुत कुछ आज बतलाया है और मैं आशा करता हूँ कि ये सब जो आर्काइव हैं, हमारे जो वीडियोस हैं, ये हमेशा हमारे साथ रहेंगे और कभी रिसर्च का जरूरत पड़ा, चाहे कुछ जानने की आवश्यकता पड़ी तो ये हमेशा वीडियोस यूट्यूब इत्यादि में रहेगा. तो अंकल जी आपको विशेष धन्यवाद है और रेडियो पे आने के लिए.